Captain Zixtara of the Hegemony Enforcement Division had never encountered a species quite like humans before today. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and chitinous plating that gleamed under the harsh lights of Detention Block 7, he commanded respect through size alone. His species, the Vorthak, had been the military backbone of the Galactic Hegemony for over 2 centuries. They were bred for war, enhanced for combat, and had never met their match. Until now, the human female stood barely reaching his chest, her dark hair pulled back in a simple knot, wearing nothing but the standard gray prisoner uniform that looked more like rags on her small frame. Her hands were bound with quantum restraints that could hold a rampaging Gorlax, yet she seemed completely at ease. Most prisoners cowered when brought before him. This one studied him with curious brown eyes, as if he were an interesting puzzle to solve. Prisoner 7749, Zixtara rumbled in Standard Galactic, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had crushed rebellions on a dozen worlds. You stand accused of acts of terrorism against hegemony installations, destruction of military property, and inciting rebellion among subjugated populations. How do you answer these charges? The human tilted her head slightly. When she spoke, her voice was calm and steady. My name is Sarah Chun. I'm a lieutenant commander in the Terran Defense Force. According to the Galactic Accords, I'm entitled to treatment as a prisoner of war. Zixtara's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his kind. The Terran Defense Force? That ragtag collection of primitives barely qualifies as a military organization. Your planet isn't even recognized as a sovereign entity by the hegemony. You're insurgents, nothing more. Recognition is a luxury, not a requirement for legitimacy, Sarah replied evenly. We exist. We fight. That makes us real enough. The captain's secondary arms gestured to his aide, a nervous Skithari whose tentacles writhed with anxiety. Show her the footage. A holographic display materialized between them, showing the smoking ruins of what had been a hegemony supply depot on the frontier world of Kepler, 442b. The destruction was complete, the massive facility reduced to twisted metal and scattered debris across several square kilometers. Your handiwork, prisoner 7749. 17 billion credits worth of equipment destroyed. 43 hegemony personnel killed. All because your people refused to accept the natural order of the galaxy. Sarah studied the hologram with professional interest. Impressive secondary explosions. Someone really knew what they were doing with the fusion cores. You admit to this act of terrorism? I admit to being proud of my people's tactical excellence. She met his gaze directly. That depot was supplying weapons to 3 different slave worlds, helping your forces maintain oppressive regimes over populations that never consented to hegemony rule. Taking it out saved lives. Zixtara leaned forward, all 4 arms planted on the interrogation table. You speak of consent as if it matters. The strong rule the weak. This is the way of the universe. Your species learned to use fire while mine was already traveling between stars. You should be grateful the hegemony offers you the chance to serve in the natural order rather than simply exterminating you as the pest species you are. For the first time since entering the room, Sarah's composure showed a crack. Not fear, but something that might have been pity. You really believe that, don't you? That might makes right, that the ability to conquer gives you the authority to rule. It is not belief, it is fact, observable reality. Then, you've observed very little. Sarah shifted in her restraints, somehow making the uncomfortable position look casual. Tell me, Captain, how many human worlds has the hegemony successfully conquered and held? The question caught Zixtara off guard. His aide's tentacles curled inward nervously. Irrelevant. Your species will be brought to heel like all the others. Is it irrelevant? Because from where I sit, it seems like a pretty important data point. 3 years ago, the hegemony had never heard of humans. Today, every frontier commander knows our name. In that time, you've attempted to establish control over 14 human colonies. How many of those attempts succeeded? Zixtara's chitinous plates rattled slightly, a sign of agitation his species couldn't fully suppress. The truth was uncomfortable. Despite overwhelming technological and numerical superiority, the hegemony had yet to successfully pacify a single human world. Every victory turned into a Pyrrhic defeat as humans adapted, evolved their tactics, and struck back in ways no other species had managed. "Temporary setbacks," he growled. "Your people fight dirty without honor. We fight smart," Sarah corrected. "There's a difference. Honor is a luxury for those who can afford to lose with dignity. We can't afford that luxury, so we've learned to win ugly instead." The captain stood abruptly, his massive frame casting a shadow over the small human. "Perhaps what you need is a demonstration of the futility of your position." "Guard!" A hegemony trooper in powered armor stepped through the doorway, plasma rifle held at ready position. The armor made him nearly as large as the captain, and the rifle could vaporize an armored vehicle. "Bring her to execution chamber 1. If she won't see reason, perhaps watching some of her fellow terrorists die will adjust her perspective." As they moved through the corridors of the detention facility, Sarah observed everything with the methodical attention of a trained soldier. Guard rotations, camera positions, structural weak points, emergency systems. The facility was impressive by galactic standards, a fortress designed to hold the most dangerous prisoners from 100 different species. It had never been breached in its 40-year operational history. The execution chamber was a sterile white room with observation windows and a central platform where the condemned would meet their end. 3 other humans were already secured to the platform, all wearing the same gray uniforms, all maintaining the same calm composure that seemed to be a universal human trait. "Behold your fellow insurgents," Zixthara announced with obvious satisfaction. They were captured during the raid on Proxima Station, each one responsible for the deaths of loyal hegemony citizens, each one about to pay the price for their crimes. Sarah studied her fellow prisoners with the same analytical gaze she'd turned on everything else. She recognized them from mission briefings, though she'd never served with them directly. Martinez from the 3rd Reconnaissance Battalion, Kim from Special Operations, Jackson from the Corps of Engineers. All good soldiers. All people who'd made the choice to fight against impossible odds because someone had to. "Any last words before the sentence is carried out?" the captain asked mockingly. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, then spoke in a voice that carried clearly through the chamber speakers. "You know what fascinates me about the hegemony? You've created this vast empire, conquered hundreds of species, established this elaborate hierarchy of power and control. But for all your technology, all your military might, all your carefully constructed order, you've never learned the most important lesson about war." "And what lesson would that be?" Sarah smiled, and something in that expression made Zixthara's blood run cold. "You can kill a human, Captain. You can torture us, break us down, make us suffer in ways that would destroy the mind of any civilized being. But you can't defeat us, because every time you kill one of us, 10 more remember why they're fighting. Every atrocity you commit creates 100 new recruits. Every victory you celebrate sows the seeds of your eventual defeat." Before the captain could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Emergency lights bathed the execution chamber in pulsing red as automated voices announced a containment breach in the lower levels. "Impossible," Zixthara snarled into his communicator. "This facility is impregnable. What's happening down there?" The response was barely coherent through the static of weapon discharges and explosions. "Unknown contacts in the maintenance levels. They're moving through the infrastructure. We can't get a clear count, but they're hitting power nodes and security stations. Sir, they're not coming through the main entrances. They're already inside." Sarah's smile widened slightly. "Did I mention that humans are exceptionally good at making friends? Turns out, when you treat people decently, help them when they're in trouble, maybe share your food and medicine with them, they tend to remember that kindness. Funny how that works." More alarms joined the symphony of chaos as systems throughout the facility began going offline. The lights flickered and died, replaced by the dim glow of emergency power. In the distance, the distinctive whine of human plasma weapons could be heard mixing with the heavier reports of hegemony firearms. The maintenance crews, Zixthara realized with growing horror. You corrupted our own maintenance staff. Corrupted is such an ugly word, Sarah replied conversationally. I prefer convinced. Turns out the Zephyrian workers you've been using to maintain this place have some serious grievances about working conditions. When word got around that humans were willing to treat them as equals rather than disposable labor, well, let's just say they were very motivated to help us out. The captain drew his sidearm, a massive pistol designed to put down the largest and most dangerous species in the galaxy. It won't matter. You're trapped in here with us. Your rescue party will be cut down long before they reach this level. Rescue party? Sarah laughed, a sound that somehow carried both amusement and menace. Captain, I think you misunderstand the situation. This isn't a rescue. This is a recruitment drive. The execution chamber doors exploded inward as shaped charges precisely placed by people who understood the facility's construction took out the reinforced barriers. Through the smoke and debris came not the armored forms of human soldiers, but a mixed group of beings from half a dozen different species, all armed with weapons clearly of human manufacture, but adapted for their specific physiologies. Leading them was a Zephyrian whose normally peaceful features were set in grim determination, carrying a weapon that looked like it had been cobbled together from maintenance tools and military hardware. Behind him came two of the massive Gorlak species, beings who normally worked as heavy laborers but now moved with the coordinated precision of trained warriors. A group of quick-moving Skithari rounded out the assault team, their tentacles wrapped around weapons designed for their multiple-limb physiology. Status report, Sarah called out as the newcomers secured the chamber with professional efficiency. All primary objectives secured, the Zephyrian replied in accented but clear standard. Power grid compromised, communications down, armory captured, guard barracks neutralized with non-lethal gas. Estimated 15 minutes before hegemony reinforcements can organize an effective response. Zixthara stared in disbelief as one of the Gorlaks used a tool clearly designed by human engineers to carefully remove the quantum restraints from the prisoners. This is impossible. These species don't fight. They're laborers, service workers, barely above slave status. Everyone fights when they have something worth fighting for, Sarah replied as feeling returned to her hands. The trick is giving them that something and then teaching them how to win. As if to emphasize her point, one of the Skithari moved to a wall panel and began rapidly manipulating the controls with the practiced ease of someone who had received extensive technical training. Within moments, the facility's entire security system display was accessible, showing the positions of all remaining hegemony forces. The humans taught us to read these systems, the Skithari explained to the stunned captain. They taught us that knowledge is power, and that power shared makes everyone stronger. Sarah accepted a weapon from one of the Gorlaks, checking it with the automatic motions of someone who had handled firearms for most of her adult life. You see, Captain, the hegemony makes the same mistake that every empire in history has made. You assume that superior technology and overwhelming force are enough to maintain control. But you forget that people who have nothing left to lose become very dangerous very quickly. The sounds of fighting were growing closer as hegemony security forces attempted to retake critical areas of the facility. The Mixed Liberation Force began moving with practiced coordination, clearly following predetermined plans. This facility held 400 political prisoners from 17 different species, Sarah continued, as they prepared to move. Did it ever occur to you to wonder what they might teach each other during those long hours in their cells? What they might plan together? What they might be willing to sacrifice to ensure their children didn't grow up under hegemony rule? Captain Zixthara found himself backing toward the observation windows as the reality of his situation became clear. You can't possibly hold this facility against reinforcements. The hegemony navy will reduce this entire asteroid to space just before they'll allow such an insurrection to succeed. You're probably right, Sarah agreed cheerfully, which is why we're not planning to hold it. Before he could ask what she meant, explosions began echoing through the facility's lower levels. Not the sharp cracks of combat explosives, but the deeper, more sustained rumbles of demolition charges taking out primary structural supports. "We came here for two things, Captain," Sarah explained as her liberation force began moving toward the exit routes they had clearly mapped out in advance. First, to free everyone in this facility and give them the choice of where to go next. Second, to send a message. The facility shuddered as more support structures failed. Through the observation windows, Zixtara could see small spacecraft of obviously human design moving to dock with various airlocks, ready to evacuate the liberated prisoners. "What message?" he demanded. Sarah paused at the entrance to the chamber, surrounded by beings from species that had been considered pacified and harmless just hours before. All of them now armed, trained, and moving with the confidence of people who had discovered their own power. "That the age of empires is ending," she said simply, "and that humans remember their friends." The last thing Captain Zixtara saw before the evacuation ships disappeared into hyperspace was the facility's main structure collapsing in on itself, taking with it 40 years of hegemony control and the comfortable assumption that some species were born to rule while others were born to serve. 3 months after the destruction of Detention Facility 7, the Hegemony Council convened an emergency session aboard their mobile command fortress, Eternal Dominion. The massive vessel, larger than most moons and bristling with enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems, represented the ultimate expression of hegemony might. Yet the beings gathered in its central chamber felt anything but secure. High Chancellor Vexnari, whose crystalline form reflected the chamber's dim lighting in fractal patterns, reviewed the reports with growing unease. The hegemony had ruled through fear and overwhelming force for over 3 centuries, but the mathematics of control were becoming increasingly troubling. 17 facilities compromised in the last quarter, she announced to the assembled council members. Not attacked from without, but undermined from within. In every case, the insurgents demonstrated detailed knowledge of our systems, our procedures, our weaknesses. General Thakmaran, military commander of the 4th Fleet, slammed one massive fist on the council table. "We should have glassed every human world the moment they appeared on our sensors. This cancer could have been excised before it spread. And yet our intelligence suggests that doing so now would only accelerate the problem." Chancellor Vexnari replied coldly. "Admiral Qualtin, please brief the Council on the current strategic situation." The Admiral, a member of the aquatic Meridae species who required a specialized environmental suit to attend Council meetings, activated the central holographic display. Stars and trade routes filled the space above the table. But what caught everyone's attention was the spreading pattern of red indicators showing systems where hegemony control had become complicated. "The situation is unprecedented in hegemony history," Admiral Qualtin began, his translated voice carrying the formal cadence typical of his species. "The humans appear to have developed what our xenosociologists are calling a viral resistance strategy. Rather than confronting our forces directly, they integrate with subjugated populations and teach them techniques for asymmetric warfare." The display zoomed in on a sector that had been considered fully pacified just 6 months earlier. The Andorian Mining Collective, for example. 3 human advisors arrived on freighter ships, ostensibly as technical consultants. Within weeks, mining output began to decline due to equipment failures. When we investigated, we discovered that the miners had learned to sabotage their own equipment in ways that appeared accidental, but were actually precisely calculated to maximize damage while minimizing detectability. "Equipment failures can be corrected," General Thakmiran growled. "Execute the saboteurs and their families. Fear will restore order." "We tried that approach on Kepler, 438c," the Admiral replied grimly. "The result was a complete work stoppage. Every member of the native population, across an entire continent, simply stopped working. No violence, no open rebellion, just passive resistance on a scale we've never encountered. Our production quotas dropped to zero. When we attempted to force compliance through orbital bombardment, the human advisors had already evacuated the population to prepared underground shelters. Council member Zarthal, whose insectoid features made his expressions difficult to read, clicked his mandibles in the rhythmic pattern that indicated deep thought among his people. Perhaps we are approaching this incorrectly. These humans clearly possess some form of advanced psychological manipulation technology. We should focus our research efforts on developing countermeasures. That was our initial hypothesis as well, Chancellor Vexnari replied. We captured several human advisors and subjected them to the most intensive interrogation procedures available to hegemony science. The results were illuminating. The display changed to show medical readouts and psychological profiles. No advanced technology, no psychic abilities, no biochemical enhancement beyond standard human baseline. What they possess is something far more dangerous. They appear to genuinely believe in concepts that our subject populations find compelling, such as the radical notion that all sapient beings deserve to determine their own fate, that cooperation between equals produces better results than domination of the weak by the strong, that individuals have inherent worth regardless of their species' position in the galactic hierarchy. The Chancellor's crystalline form shifted through several color spectrums, indicating extreme distress. These ideas spread through populations like a virus, and we have no effective countermeasures. General Thakmiran stood abruptly, his massive frame imposing even among the genetically enhanced leadership of the hegemony. Ideas can be countered with superior firepower. Give me authorization to cleanse a dozen human-influenced worlds completely. The surviving populations will remember the price of rebellion and validate every human claim about hegemony brutality. At midan quautin in tazet. General, with respect, the humans appear to have anticipated that exact response. Their propaganda focuses heavily on portraying us as mindlessly violent oppressors. Massive retaliation would only prove their point and likely accelerate recruitment to their cause. The debate was interrupted by an urgent communication from the fortress's bridge. Council members, we have an incoming transmission on all frequencies. The source appears to be human, but the signal is being broadcast from coordinates that should be empty space. Put it through, Chancellor Vexnari commanded. The holographic display cleared, revealing the face of a human female in her middle years. Her hair was streaked with gray, her face marked by lines that suggested someone who had spent a lifetime making difficult decisions. Behind her, the setting appeared to be the bridge of a spacecraft, though the design was unlike anything in hegemony databases. Greetings to the Hegemony Council, the woman said in flawless, standard galactic. I am Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Terran Defense Force. I believe you've been looking for us. The council members exchanged glances of disbelief. No human fleet existed that could approach the Eternal Dominion undetected. The fortress's sensor arrays could track a single fighter craft at a range of several star systems. Impossible, General Thakmiran snarled. Our sensors show no ships within 50 light-years of this position. Admiral Vasquez smiled with what appeared to be genuine amusement. Your sensors are looking for ships built with hegemony technology and design philosophy. You're scanning for large metal signatures, fusion drives, gravitational distortions. You're not looking for vessels grown rather than built, powered by exotic matter that barely interacts with normal space-time, crewed by beings who understand that the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than your empire imagines. As she spoke, the space around the Eternal Dominion began to shimmer. Reality itself seemed to ripple as dozens of ships materialized from what had appeared to be empty void. They were unlike anything in hegemony records. Organic curves instead of angular lines, surfaces that seemed to shift and flow like living tissue, propulsion systems that bent space rather than pushing against it. You see, council members, while you've been busy conquering and enslaving, the rest of us have been learning and growing. Did you really think that in a galaxy containing millions of sapient species, only yours would develop advanced technology? The difference is that we chose to share our discoveries rather than hoard them for conquest. Chancellor Vexnari's form cycled through colors that had no names in Standard Galactic, indicating emotional states so extreme that translation was impossible. What do you want? To offer you a choice, Admiral Vasquez replied simply. The same choice we've offered to every species we've encountered. You can continue down the path of empire, trying to hold together your territories through fear and violence until the inevitable collapse destroys everything you've built. Or you can join the community of free peoples who are working together to build something better. You speak of choice as if you have the power to enforce your will, General Thakmiran said, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. This fortress alone carries enough firepower to reduce your entire fleet to cosmic dust. General, please look more carefully at our fleet composition. The hegemony sensors, now recalibrated to detect the new ship configurations, began providing tactical data. What they revealed was horrifying from the Council's perspective. The ships surrounding them weren't just human designs. Analysis showed technological signatures from dozens of species, many of which were supposedly under hegemony control. The Zephyrians contributed their expertise in exotic matter manipulation, Admiral Vasquez explained conversationally. The Mordai shared their knowledge of space-time engineering. The Skithari taught us quantum consciousness interfacing. Even the Gorlax, whom you considered suitable only for manual labor, turned out to have an intuitive understanding of dimensional mechanics that your scientists never bothered to explore. Council member Zarthal's mandibles clicked rapidly. This is a violation of every treaty, every agreement of protection between the hegemony and its client species. Treaties signed under duress aren't worth the crystalline matrices they're recorded on, the Admiral replied. But, more importantly, these beings aren't breaking agreements with the hegemony. They're making new agreements with each other, based on mutual respect and shared benefit rather than conquest and exploitation. The tactical displays were painting an increasingly grim picture for the hegemony forces. The Allied fleet wasn't just numerically superior. Their technology appeared to be several generations beyond anything the Empire had developed. Ships that could exist partially outside normal space-time, weapons that violated previously understood physical laws, defensive systems that seemed to anticipate attacks before they were launched. You cannot possibly believe that this coalition of inferior species can challenge the might of the hegemony, Chancellor Vexnari said, though her changing colors suggested she was trying to convince herself as much as the human admiral. I don't have to believe it, Chancellor. I can prove it. Admiral Vasquez gestured, and one of the Allied ships demonstrated its capabilities by briefly phasing the Eternal Dominion's primary weapon arrays out of normal space-time, rendering them temporarily inoperable before allowing them to return to baseline reality. But proving our strength isn't why I'm here. Then why? Because humans have this annoying habit of hoping that people can change, even when experience suggests otherwise. We've seen species abandon the path of conquest when they realize there are better alternatives. We've watched former enemies become valued allies when they discover the benefits of cooperation over domination. Admiral Queltin activated his suit's translation protocols to maximum sensitivity, wanting to ensure he understood every nuance of the human's words. You're offering the hegemony membership in your alliance? I'm offering individual hegemony species the choice to determine their own futures. Your empire has done an excellent job of convincing everyone that Vorthack military superiority, crystalline administrative efficiency, and Merdai strategic thinking represent the natural order of galactic civilization. But what if that's not true? What if every species has unique gifts that could benefit everyone if they were free to develop and share them? The implications were staggering. The hegemony's entire social and political structure was based on the assumption that some species were inherently superior to others. The idea that a Skithari might have insights that could benefit a Vorthak warrior, or that a Zephyrian worker might understand principles of physics that eluded crystalline scientists, was fundamentally incompatible with everything the Empire represented. You're talking about the complete dissolution of established order, General Thokmiran accused. Chaos. Anarchy. I'm talking about freedom, Admiral Vasquez replied. The freedom for every being to reach their full potential, instead of being forced into roles determined by an accident of biology. The freedom to cooperate with others as equals, instead of serving superiors or dominating inferiors. The freedom to build something together that's greater than any of U.S. could achieve alone. She paused, and, when she continued, her voice carried a note of genuine sadness. General, in the 3 months since we liberated Detention Facility 7, 17,000 Vorthak citizens have requested asylum with the Free World Alliance. Not soldiers seeking to avoid combat, but scientists, engineers, artists, philosophers. People who were suffocating under a system that told them their only value was their ability to enforce the will of others through violence. The number hit the council like a physical blow. 17,000 represented a significant percentage of the Vorthak intellectual class, people whose loss would seriously impact the Empire's technological and administrative capabilities. They were corrupted by your propaganda, General Thokmiran said, but his voice lacked conviction. They were offered the chance to pursue their passions instead of their assigned roles. Did you know that 3 of your former military engineers have made breakthrough discoveries in nonviolent applications of force field technology? Or that a former interrogation specialist has become one of our most effective mediators for interspecies disputes? Chancellor Vexnari's color patterns shifted to deep blues and purples, colors associated with profound contemplation among her people. What exactly are you proposing? A transition period. 5 years for any hegemony species that wants to explore alternatives to imperial rule. No military pressure, no economic sanctions, no propaganda campaigns. Just the opportunity to see what their citizens choose when they're free to choose. And if they choose to remain with the hegemony, then that's their choice, and we'll respect it. But it has to be a real choice made by informed citizens, not subjects kept in ignorance of alternatives. The offer hung in the space between the 2 fleets like a challenge that neither side could easily accept or reject. For the Hegemony Council, it represented everything they had been taught to despise: the abandonment of hierarchy, the rejection of natural order, the dangerous notion that might did not automatically confer the right to rule. But the mathematics were becoming impossible to ignore. Every day brought new reports of systems where hegemony control was weakening, where populations were learning to resist not through violence, but through simple non-cooperation. The Empire was slowly strangling on its own contradictions. "We need time to consider your proposal," Chancellor Vexnari finally said. "Of course. But while you're considering, I should mention that we've established communication networks that reach every world in hegemony space. Your citizens are already learning about the alternatives available to them. The choice is happening whether you officially sanction it or not." Admiral Vasquez's image began to fade as her transmission ended. "We'll be monitoring hegemony communications. When you're ready to discuss the details of a peaceful transition, or if you decide you'd prefer to resolve this through force, we'll be ready either way." The Allied fleet began to fade from sensors as the ships returned to whatever dimension they had emerged from, leaving the Eternal Dominion alone with the growing realization that the Age of Empires was indeed coming to an end. The evacuation of the Vega system had been completed successfully, but the aftermath left Captain Zixthara struggling with concepts that challenged everything he thought he understood about power, purpose, and what it meant to serve something greater than oneself. Standing in the cargo bay of the transport ship Harmony's Edge, watching as the last group of refugees were settled into temporary housing units, he found himself questioning not just individual orders, but the entire foundation of the civilization he had sworn to protect. His squad of Vorthak warriors had performed beyond even their own expectations during the relief operation. Their tactical training had proven invaluable for coordinating complex evacuation procedures under extreme time pressure. Their physical capabilities had made the difference in dozens of life-or-death situations where beings needed to be carried from dangerous environments. Their discipline and leadership had helped maintain order among panicked populations who had never seen their worlds face extinction. But what disturbed Zixthara most was how naturally his warriors had adapted to working alongside beings they had been taught to consider inferior. The young warrior who had questioned him on New Haven now moved through the refugee camps with easy confidence, communicating with Zephyrian families in their own language, which he had somehow learned during the 3-day operation. "Sir," the young Vorthak approached him as they prepared to return to hegemony space. "The Skithari technical coordinator wants to thank us personally for our assistance with the quantum stabilization procedures." "Warriors don't require thanks for performing their duty," Zixthara replied automatically, but the words fell hollow even as he spoke them. "With respect, sir, I'm not sure it was duty that motivated us out there. It felt more like choice." The distinction bothered Zixthara more than he wanted to admit. During the evacuation, none of his warriors had followed orders because they feared punishment for disobedience. They had acted because they understood the stakes, because they had seen the value of what they were protecting, because they had chosen to be part of something that made a difference. "Report to your quarters," he said finally. "I need to file our operational assessment with Hegemony Command." But as he sat in his private cabin, staring at the communication interface that would connect him to the Imperial chain of command, Zixthara found himself unable to begin the report. How could he explain what he had witnessed without undermining everything the hegemony represented? How could he describe beings working together as equals without questioning the fundamental assumptions that justified Imperial rule? A soft chime indicated an incoming communication request. The identifier showed it was coming from Admiral Vasquez aboard one of the Free World's Alliance coordination vessels. "Captain," she said when he accepted the connection, "I wanted to thank you and your warriors for your exceptional service during the evacuation. Your tactical expertise saved thousands of lives." "We performed our assigned tasks adequately," Zixthara replied stiffly, though he found it difficult to maintain the formal tone when faced with what appeared to be genuine gratitude. "Captain, may I speak frankly?" "Proceed." Admiral Vasquez appeared to consider her words carefully before continuing. "I've been watching you and your squad during this operation. You're not the same beings who came down to New Haven 3 days ago. You've seen something that changes how you understand your place in the galaxy. Warriors adapt to changing tactical situations. That is our nature. This isn't about tactics, and you know it. This is about purpose, about whether you're fighting for something worth preserving, or just maintaining a system because change feels dangerous." The accusation hit closer to home than Zixthara wanted to admit. The hegemony has brought order to the galaxy for over 3 centuries. That stability has allowed billions of beings to live in peace. Has it? Or has it simply prevented them from choosing the lives they might have preferred? "Captain, in the last 72 hours, you've seen what beings can accomplish when they're working toward goals they believe in rather than following orders they're afraid to question. Which felt more like the society you want to be part of." Before he could respond, his communication system alerted him to an urgent incoming transmission from Hegemony Command. Admiral Vasquez's image faded as the Imperial communication override took priority. "Captain Zixthara," came the familiar voice of High Admiral Morlacton. "Report your status immediately." "Sir," returning to base after completion of assigned reconnaissance mission. "Reconnaissance mission?" The Admiral's tone carried a dangerous edge. "Our monitoring stations detected Vorthak transponder codes in proximity to known Free World's Alliance vessels." "Explain." The moment of decision had arrived sooner than Zixthara had expected. He could provide the standard operational report, describing the human settlement as a legitimate military target and recommending immediate orbital bombardment. He could characterize the evacuation operation as enemy propaganda and suggest countermeasures to prevent Imperial citizens from witnessing similar displays of interspecies cooperation. Or he could tell the truth. Sir, we encountered a humanitarian crisis that required immediate intervention. The Free World Alliance had organized relief operations for the Vega system emergency. We provided tactical support for civilian evacuation procedures. The silence that followed lasted long enough for Zixtara to wonder if the connection had been severed. When Admiral Morlack 10 finally spoke, his voice carried the controlled fury of someone who has discovered betrayal in the ranks. You provided material assistance to enemy forces? You allowed Imperial warriors to serve under alien command. Sir, 30 million civilians were facing certain death from solar instabilities. The evacuation was not your concern. The Admiral's roar carried clearly through the communication system. Your assignment was reconnaissance and assessment, not humanitarian intervention. Captain, you will return to base immediately and submit yourself for court-martial proceedings. Your entire squad will face charges of treason and collaboration with enemy forces. The connection terminated, leaving Zixtara staring at a blank screen and contemplating the ruins of his military career. Around him, the transport ship continued its journey toward hegemony space, carrying warriors who had discovered something that Imperial doctrine insisted was impossible, that strength could be measured in lives saved rather than enemies defeated. A new communication request appeared on his console, this time from the ship's bridge. Sir, came the voice of his navigation officer, we're receiving another transmission from the Alliance fleet. Put it through. Admiral Vasquez appeared again on his screen, but this time her expression carried urgent concern rather than friendly conversation. Captain, we've been monitoring hegemony communication frequencies. We're aware of the orders you just received. Admiral, with respect, this is an internal hegemony matter. Captain, you and your warriors are about to face execution for the crime of saving lives. How is that an internal matter? The blunt statement forced Zixtara to confront the reality he had been avoiding. Imperial military justice was swift and decisive when dealing with what it considered treason. There would be no lengthy trial, no opportunity to explain the circumstances that had led to his decision. Within hours of returning to base, he and his warriors would be dead. What are you suggesting, Admiral? That you have another choice. The Free World Alliance offers sanctuary to any Imperial citizens who request it, no questions asked. Your warriors have proven themselves valuable members of the galactic community. We would welcome their continued service. You're asking me to defect, to abandon everything I've sworn to protect. I'm asking you to choose between a system that would execute you for saving lives and a community that would honor you for it. Which one is really worth protecting? Zixtara found himself thinking about the young Vorthak warrior who had spent the last 3 days learning Zephyrian language and customs, about the technical specialists who had discovered capabilities they never knew they possessed, about 30 million beings who were alive because warriors had chosen to serve something larger than military doctrine. Admiral, I need to consult with my squad. Of course, but Captain, whatever you decide quickly. Our sensors show hegemony vessels moving to intercept your transport. You don't have much time. The communication ended, leaving Zixtara alone with perhaps the most important decision of his life. He activated the ship's internal communication system, calling all crew members to the main cargo bay. 23 Vorthak warriors assembled before him, all of them bearing the subtle marks of beings who had experienced something that changed their fundamental understanding of themselves. They stood at attention with military precision, but their eyes held questions that military training had never taught them to ask. Warriors, Zixtara began, we face a choice that will determine not just our own futures, but the kind of galaxy our actions will help create. I'm going to explain our situation honestly, and then ask each of you to make an individual decision about how you choose to proceed. He described the orders from Hegemony Command, the court-martial that awaited them, the certainty of execution that followed conviction for treason. He explained the offer of sanctuary from the Free World Alliance, the opportunity to continue serving, but under a different understanding of what service meant. I won't pretend this is an easy choice, he concluded. To accept Alliance Sanctuary means abandoning everything we've been taught about duty, honor, and loyalty to the Empire. But to return to hegemony space means accepting execution for the crime of saving lives. The young warrior who had questioned him on New Haven stepped forward. Sir, with respect, I don't think we'd be abandoning duty, honor, and loyalty. I think we'd be discovering what those concepts really mean when they're not defined by people who see other beings as resources to be exploited. Another warrior nodded agreement. Captain, for the last 3 days, I've felt more useful, more valued, more genuinely helpful than in 15 years of Imperial service. These Alliance beings don't see us as living weapons to be pointed at their enemies. They see us as individuals with skills that can make their community stronger. The refugees we evacuated added a third warrior, children who would have died if we hadn't been there to help. How is saving them a betrayal of what it means to be Vorthak? One by one, his warriors spoke their thoughts. Not one of them expressed eagerness to return to hegemony space and face execution for doing what they all recognized as the right thing. Not one of them suggested that Imperial doctrine was worth dying for when it meant abandoning beings who needed their help. Then, we're agreed, Zixtaros said finally. We'll accept Alliance Sanctuary and continue our service under their banner. As if summoned by his words, the transport's communication system activated with an incoming message from Admiral Vasquez. Captain, our sensors show 4 hegemony cruisers moving to intercept your position. If you're going to change course, it needs to happen now. Understood, Admiral. Transmitting our acceptance of Sanctuary request. Received and acknowledged. Welcome to the Free World Alliance, Captain. We are transmitting navigation coordinates for the nearest Alliance facility. Your transport will be escorted by Alliance vessels to ensure safe passage. As the transport altered course away from hegemony space, Zixtara found himself thinking about the magnitude of the decision they had just made. 23 experienced Vorthak warriors, trained at enormous expense by the Imperial military system, had just chosen exile over execution, cooperation over conquest, service to the weak over domination of the strong. Sir, his navigation officer reported, we're being hailed by the lead hegemony pursuit vessel. Put it through. The image of Admiral Morlac 10 appeared on screen, his features twisted with fury and disbelief. Captain Zixtara, you will alter course immediately and return to base for processing. This is your final warning. Admiral, Zixtara replied with surprising calm. I respectfully decline. My warriors and I have chosen to serve a cause that values life over ideology, cooperation over conquest, hope over fear. You're traitors, oath breakers. You've abandoned everything that makes you Vorthak. No, Admiral, we've discovered what it really means to be Vorthak. We're warriors, and we found something worth fighting for. The hegemony admiral's image disappeared as the pursuit vessels fell behind, unable to match the exotic propulsion systems of their Alliance escorts. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also possibility. Behind lay the certainty of death and service to a system that had outlived whatever nobility it might once have possessed. As they approached Alliance space, Zixtara received another communication from Admiral Vasquez. Captain, we've prepared quarters for you and your warriors at the new Harmony facility. I think you'll find it interesting to see what former Imperial citizens have built when they're free to pursue their own vision of what civilization should look like. Admiral, what will be expected of us? What role will Vorthak warriors play in this alliance of free peoples? The same role you played during the Vega evacuation, Captain. You'll help protect those who need protection, serve those who need service, and discover what you're capable of when you're not limited by someone else's definition of what your species should be. The transport ship Inevitable Justice crossed into Alliance space, carrying 23 former Imperial warriors who had chosen to become something new. Behind them, the hegemony pursuit vessels stopped at the border unwilling to risk open war over a single squad of defectors, but also unable to ignore the symbolism of their loss. The Age of Empires was ending, one choice at a time. 1 year had passed since Captain Zixtara made the choice that transformed him from an Imperial enforcer into something he was still learning to define. Standing on the observation deck of the Alliance vessel Unity's Promise, watching the final hegemony stronghold prepare for what everyone knew would be the last battle of the war, he reflected on how completely his understanding of strength, duty, and victory had changed. The fortress world of Dominus Prime hung in space like a monument to everything the old empire had represented. Massive defense platforms surrounded the planet, each one capable of destroying entire fleets. The surface bristled with weapon installations that could sterilize star systems. Deep beneath the planetary crust, the last remnants of the hegemony high command waited in bunkers designed to survive the death of the galaxy itself. But for all its defensive capabilities, Dominus Prime felt less like an impregnable fortress and more like a tomb. The empire that had built it no longer existed. Of the 3,000 worlds that had once acknowledged hegemony rule, fewer than a dozen remained loyal to the old order. The rest had either joined the Free World Alliance or declared independence, and chosen to govern themselves according to their own values and traditions. Final status report, Captain, Admiral Vasquez said as she joined him at the viewport. Her hair had gone completely gray during the past year, but her eyes held the satisfaction of someone who had seen a vision become reality. All Alliance fleet elements in position, Zixtara replied, though his title was no longer captain. The Free World Alliance didn't use Imperial ranks, preferring functional descriptions that reflected actual responsibilities. He was now a coordination specialist, responsible for tactical liaison between the various species' military contingents. 1,700 vessels representing 43 different technological paradigms, all under unified command for the first time in galactic history. The fleet surrounding Dominus Prime was unlike anything that had ever assembled. Crystalline ships that existed partially outside normal space-time flew alongside Gorlak's heavy cruisers that could ram through planetary defenses. Skithari vessels with quantum-entangled communication systems coordinated with theorem weaver entities that existed as pure mathematical constructs. Human ships served as coordination hubs, their crews trained in the complex art of enabling cooperation between radically different forms of consciousness. Any word from the surrender negotiations? Zixtara asked. Admiral Vasquez checked her handheld communicator, a device that somehow managed to translate not just languages, but entire conceptual frameworks between species. High Chancellor Vexnari is still insisting that the hegemony represents legitimate galactic government, and that we're illegitimate rebels. She's demanding that we recognize imperial authority over all formerly controlled territories. After losing 99% of those territories to voluntary defection, apparently, she believes that imperial legitimacy doesn't require the consent of the governed. It's a perspective that's become increasingly difficult to maintain, but the leadership seems committed to it. Zixtara understood the psychological dynamics at work better than most. He had once shared the same unquestioning faith in imperial authority, the same certainty that hierarchy and control were natural laws rather than choices made by conscious beings. Breaking free from those assumptions required confronting the possibility that everything he had believed about the universe might be wrong. "Sir," came a voice from the bridge communication station, "we're receiving a transmission from the planetary surface. It's addressed to coordination specialist Zixtara specifically." The former Imperial captain exchanged glances with Admiral Vasquez. Very few beings on Dominus Prime would have known his current designation, and fewer still would have had reason to contact him directly. Put it through. The face that appeared on the main screen was one Zixtara recognized, but had hoped never to see again. General Thakmaran, the Vorthak military commander who had argued for the complete extermination of humanity during the early stages of the war. His massive frame filled the communication pickup, and His features showed the strain of someone who had watched everything he had built crumble around him. "So," the general said without preamble, "the famous traitor returns to finish what he started." "General," Zixtara replied calmly, "I'm not here as a traitor or a conqueror. I'm here as a member of the galactic community, hoping to end this war without further bloodshed." "Galactic community," Thakmiran sneered. "A collection of inferior species pretending they have the right to govern themselves. You've helped them destroy everything our ancestors built. Our ancestors built an empire that required the suffering of trillions to maintain its power. What we've helped build is something that lets every being reach their full potential." The general leaned forward, his expression showing a mixture of rage and genuine confusion. "Zixtara, you were one of our best officers. How did they break you so completely that you now serve those who should be serving us?" It was a question that Zixtara had asked himself countless times during the past year. How did someone abandon beliefs that had defined their entire identity? How did a lifelong warrior learn to find strength in protection rather than conquest? "They didn't break me, General. They showed me what I was capable of when I wasn't limited by someone else's definition of what it meant to be Vorthak." To illustrate his point, Zixtara activated a holographic display showing some of the operations he had